This guy used to be massive back in the 90s with one hit after another. Back then, he was called Puff Daddy before becoming P Diddy, and now he's called an alleged massive sex offender.
I'm back where I belong. Yeah, I never felt so strong.
Alleged drug-fueled orgies, prostitution, and a cover-up. Freak-offs, as they're called, at the core of a searing 3-count federal indictment against P Diddy Combs.
Sex trafficking, racketeering conspiracy, interstate transportation for prostitution.
The case against P Combs might as well just be called the freak-offs. These allegedly illegal freak-offs. It's all about the freak-offs in one way, shape, or form.
Freak-offs?
Freak-offs.
Freak-offs. Freak-offs.
Numerous civil cases have also been filed.
For the first time, we are hearing about victims who say they were minors when they were allegedly assaulted by the music star. The youngest allegedly just 9 years old.
As the case develops, attention is increasingly being focused on A-list celebrities who attended Diddy's parties.
Hey, everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party, so.
Yeah. Who's the person that's number one on that invitation list?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
A source close to DiCaprio has said he never attended freak-offs and has nothing to do with the case.
The reason no one has come forward with anything over the past few decades is because Diddy has footage of every person that has attended his parties that he can use to blackmail them. In November of 2023, singer Cassie Ventura filed a lawsuit against Diddy that would set off a chain of legal issues for Puff.
Prosecutors say for more than a decade, Diddy abused and threatened victims to fulfill his own sexual desires.
Disturbing details from the day that Diddy was seen beating his then-girlfriend Cassie in an LA hotel.
Combs can be seen grabbing Ventura and throwing her to the ground.
They claim Combs had been holding a freak-off in his hotel room with the commercial sex worker and that Cassie had been trying to escape.
In March, Fox 11 broke the story that federal authorities raided Combs' Holmby Hills home for the criminal investigation. Court documents now reveal authorities located AR-15s, narcotics, and more than 1,000 bottles of baby oil.
A judge ordered Diddy to remain behind bars until his trial after federal prosecutors argued the 54-year-old was a flight risk.
I think he came out. Mr. Combs is a fighter. He's going to fight this to the end. He's innocent.
Bruce, if I can start with you. P. Diddy's lawyer has said he's not afraid of the indictment, and in your very, very popular video, you have said he ought to be. Why?
Well, he's not afraid of it because he doesn't have to go to jail. I call him the P. Diddler. It is so prolific what he was into, and I think it's dangerous when a lawyer sits there and goes off and say my client's innocent, blah, blah, blah. The federal government wins 96% of their cases. Just knowing a little bit what I do about what the charges are in this case, Diddy's looking at the rest of his life behind bars. So to not have some respect for the gravity of what's going on, to say I'm not afraid of it, it's just bluster. That's all that is.
And when you look at the 14-page indictment, which are the most egregious charges? Where will you see the biggest penalty coming down should he be found guilty?
It's the ritualistic torture that he put these people through. I mean, he went to the end of the earth to make sure that they didn't come out of hiding until their bruises were gone. I mean, and they had to have IVs to rehydrate them so they would last longer. I mean, all this is like Caligula on steroids. I mean, it is just an absolute torture. So it's, when it comes to sex trafficking, there's three things: either force, fraud, or coercion. And it appears to me that we have all three present in this with multiple victims. And now with this, other victims coming forward, you're going to see a superseding indictment very soon.
Vinoo, I know that you have an original, slightly different take on this case. Tell us.
Well, I know Diddy's lawyer. He's well respected within the New York legal community. My office here on Wall Street. I'm a 10-minute walk to the court. So one of the things you got to look at is success, right? And he's a successful lawyer who's beaten the federal government, as I have. And you look at this case and you read the indictment, put aside the hype. The indictment only mentions one victim. There's only one person called victim one. And perhaps, as Bruce says, there's going to be additional victims. But why didn't the government bring this earlier? And when you talk about racketeering activity, which is what he's charged with, racketeering conspiracy, well, it's defined as that he participated in a pattern of racketeering activity to the commission of at least 2 acts that are put forth in the indictment. And they mention arson and kidnapping. But when you look and you start looking at what they've put forth, there's a lot of smoke. But at this point, and we'll see, there needs to be some fire. And when you see only one victim listed, and some of these acts go back decades, well, they have a problem in that you have to at least list 2 within the last 10 years, and the indictment doesn't seem to do that. And then the other issue is, and this is where I disagree with Bruce vehemently, I mean, they knew this indictment was coming, so clearly they've been prepared. Did he move back to New York and try to surrender himself? The government didn't want it because that would hurt their bail argument. But a criminal defense attorney, as the United States Supreme Court has said and held, has a duty not only to his client in court, but in the court of public opinion. So Mark Ignifico, kudos to you. We went to the same law school. He's doing well, and he's defending his client as best as he could because, public opinion and what's out there matters, and the government has poisoned the jury pool already with these salacious talk of lubricant and all this other stuff. And the rest of it is just memes, so that's going to hurt him anyway. So he's got to defend his client in the court of public opinion as well as in court.
Bruce, some interesting points there, including the strength of Diddy's lawyer. He has a tremendous track record. What do you make of that?
Well, I have no doubt he's got a very strong lawyer, but I'm very careful when it comes to public statements. And there's a myriad of electronic data that they've gotten from both the LA and the Miami homes, and once we see the recordings that he's got, and then how much other stuff is going to come out. That's why I would be a little more cautious. It's different with Diddy because in terms of the public statements, because he's such a public figure. But I would just be more cautious than not. And counsel is right. He does have to be represented in and out of court. But right now, the only thing that matters is what happens in court, really.
Vinoo mentioned bail. He hasn't been granted bail, even though I think you, in your video, mentioned he was willing to put up $50 million. Tell me, why do you think he was not granted bail?
Well, this is a case where there's a presumptive detention. In other words, the government seeks detention, it's presumed detention, and it's up to the defense to rebut that presumption. And because of the victims and the way the case is situated, they've appealed it, but he's not getting out anytime soon.
Vinoo, he was going to put up $50 million, and I think he was going to subject himself to even having someone there monitoring him. Why didn't he get bail?
Because he's P. Diddy, right? And when the government brings a case against a celebrity, it's very hard for that celebrity to get a fair trial. Now, certainly he's getting prosecuted if he weren't Diddy. And look, the government comes in on these cases, including R. Kelly, where the federal government comes in, swooping like they're heroes to save people, to save America. And, when you look at this, you've got to look at the fact that, hey, what's the force? What's the coercion? I mean, if people were paid and they were voluntarily, doing these things and they got a benefit from it, well, the question is, should that be illegal? And I think that's the greater problem. It'll be interesting to see whether his lawyers will raise constitutional arguments, because all this is based on the theory that this somehow affected interstate commerce. And I think that's, not so strong. But he didn't get bail because he's Diddy, and the governments said he's gonna go out and hurt other people. But what they're doing is preventing his lawyers from mounting a proper defense. When you put up that kind of money, you surrender your passport, you sell your private plane, you give up the passports of all your family members. Come on. And you agree to electronic monitoring, and you move to New York to be, minutes away from the courthouse. This guy's got to, where's the presumption of innocence?
That's a good question. Final response, and then the final response from you, Bruce, and then we're going to move on to Kimberly. Are they treating him unfairly? They're not allowing him to have the same access to his lawyers as he would if he were on bail. Therefore, they are hindering his proper defense and overlooking the presumption of innocence that most people would enjoy.
Anybody else would be the same way. The government would seek detention, they would get it, and a judge wouldn't let them out. and the lawyers can come into the jail and meet with him as much as they want. So he's not being denied access to his counsel.
It's not the same as being able to have the guy in your
office.
office.
It isn't. You're right. It is not the same as being out. But on a case like this, anybody else would be detained. It's not just because he's Diddy.
Okay. I disagree. I mean, you can rebut the presumption that's there statutorily, especially with those kind of conditions.
Kimberly, Diddy's lawyer...
He did it to the satisfaction of the judge.
He did it to the satisfaction of the judge.
Well,
that's true.
Well, now they're going to... Well, they're taking the appeal to the Intermediate Appellate Court. We'll see what happens.
Okay, we will see what happens. Kimberly, so Diddy's lawyer is arguing that what happened in his parties was consensual. He went on to say, is it sex trafficking? Not if everybody wants to be there. From what you've heard, and the 14-page indictment, does it strike you that everybody wanted to be there?
Well, first, I just want to comment on a few things and correct some misconceptions. So first, it was stated earlier that trafficking is force, fraud, coercion. That is not the entire definition. It's force, fraud, coercion, deception, or threat for the purpose of exploitation. That second component is perhaps the most important component. And that's one of the key things that they're probably going to use in defense. They're going to say that this was not trafficking. It was potentially domestic violence or potentially rape or potentially sexual assault, but the statute of limitations has elapsed. There is a known trend within the criminal and civil communities of pleading non-trafficking cases as trafficking cases because of the litigation advantages it offers. There's literally peer-reviewed journal articles in law journals about this. For example, one is called Trafficking to the Rescue in UC Davis Law Review. It talks about this exact same thing, about pleading non-trafficking cases as trafficking because of the litigation the litigation advantages it offers. It was also mentioned earlier that they've known about this from some time. I'm going to give you a piece of information that is not public knowledge that I think will be very informative. I was contacted by TMZ about this indictment back in June. I don't know what happened. I don't know if a grand jury refused to indict on those charges, but this was back in June. They did not follow through with that interview because he was not indicted in June. I think that's something that's certainly going to come out in the defense. And yes, consent is an affirmative defense to trafficking. The reality is, if you look at the Trafficking Victims Protection Act and how it's been wielded and how it's been used, even before that with the Mann Act in the United States, there have been false allegations of trafficking for non-trafficking situations. I think when I read the indictment, I certainly saw some themes that can be prevalent in trafficking situations. For example, the use of drugs to coerce or deceive someone, false promises for self-actualization. So for example, if he was promising these women opportunities in Hollywood to get them into exploitable situations. I think the video evidence is going to be key, but my guess, the reason why this attorney, his defense attorney, is not particularly worried about these allegations is he is going to use a consent defense. One of the things he's probably going to try to hang his hat on is maybe videos or pictures or text messages of loving exchanges between these women or between the one victim in this indictment and the other women and Diddy. He is miscalculating because there is a volume of research about the recruitment and control mechanisms that are utilized by traffickers, which include more urbane forms of deception, coercion, or the Romeo lover type of pimping, where you're recruiting someone into an exploitable situation. In my experience, when you're looking at criminal charges, one of the tried and true methods of determining whether something's trafficking is following the money. Were these women promised money? Did they receive money? Did they have that money taken from them? How were they exploited? The plain language definition of exploitation is an unfair benefit off of somebody else's labor. That is what they're going to have to show either within the commercial sex industry or otherwise. And I don't think it's as easy of a hurdle as the government or the media is making it out to be. They will have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that this was a trafficking, aka a modern slavery. That is the standard. That's what trafficking is, modern slavery. They have to prove that, and that it wasn't something else like rape, like sexual assault, like sexual harassment, like statutory rape. And I think those are going to be some of the defenses that are raised. Yes, I just wanted to clarify. So consent is an affirmative defense for adults only. So if a minor is induced into a commercial sexually exploitative situations, consent is not an affirmative defense. A minor, if they're induced into the commercial sex industry, if they're induced into a situation of exploitation, that is trafficking. Now, with that being said, there's still an evolving understanding of what this means. So for example, in the state of California, as recent as 2016, you saw minors who were still being arrested and charged and convicted, which was upheld on appeal for prostitution. So, I mean, there's still an evolving understanding, and I think that's shameful and it should never happen, but that's the reality. I think that it's important to also look at these allegations through the lens of the time in which they occurred. There is evolving understanding of what constitutes trafficking. What constituted trafficking back in 2000 is not the same as what constitutes trafficking in 2024. And proof to that point, there are literally news articles, for example, in Atlanta, where 11 and 12-year-old children were being convicted of prostitution. That does not happen now.
Right.
There is evolving understanding, and it's
Right.
shameful, but it's important to understand there's some complexities here.
Well, thank goodness times have changed. Joy?
Matthew, you need to understand in the indictment there isn't a single charge of a minor. Okay, that's important to understand. The government said in its letter requesting detention that he be held without bail that minors were involved, but not in the indictment itself.
Okay. Thank you for clearing. Thank you for clearing that up. That's very important. We're going to start talking about the fact that he's held in the same prison as Epstein. We're going to talk about those recordings that he apparently has of people participating in his parties. But before we do that, I just want to get some idea of the cultural significance.
Matthew, that's incorrect. That's incorrect.
Repeat.
Epstein was held at the MCC. Diddy's at the MDC in Brooklyn. MCC is in Manhattan. So that needs to be corrected.
Interesting.
It has
been widely reported that he is being held at the same prison as Epstein. I'm glad you cleared that up because that is
Epstein was killed or suicided or whatever happened to him at the MCC in Manhattan, right next door to the Southern District of New York, 10-minute walk from my office as the courthouse. Diddy's in MDC. He's in building 1. Because my client is in the same building. It's kind of a protective wing. I'm representing a cop. A lot of news articles on this, accused of coercing minors.
Yeah, and
to the next guest.
say again, Bruce.
I said, let him get to the next guest.
Oh no, this is a great point. It's a great point to clear up because actually it's been widely reported that he's being held in the same prison as Epstein, and of course that raises all sorts of issues. You know, it could the same fate befall him, but it's a separate building. Thank you for that, much appreciated. So Joy, before we move on to the other matters of the case, let's talk about his cultural significance. You've been in the entertainment industry for quite a number of years now. First of all, why is this guy a big deal? There'll be people who know his career, in and out, but I'm afraid not everyone does. Why is he a big deal?
Oh, absolutely. This is huge. I mean, I fully believe that Diddy is the tip of the iceberg. First of all, he's a billionaire. He has preyed on musicians. It's very widely known, actually. Diddy's a very powerful figure. He's been talked about, those white parties, who knows? This has been an open secret for years. So the fact that this is now coming to light is not surprising me or many other people in the industry. First of all, Diddy preyed on young, naive musicians. He got them into complicated contracts. As a musician, I know about these 360 deals. These deals where basically Diddy owned them from the beginning. And because, a lot of musicians are, starry-eyed, they're young, they'll fall into these contracts. He made them into stars and then he owned them. He filmed people. Now, this is allegedly, but I'm pretty sure this has happened. Diddy's goose is cooked. He has filmed them in these acts, in these white parties, which are satanic. They're widely known to be ceremonies, ritualistic, involving sex, involving violence. He would film people who were drugged, who were definitely coerced. And then he would use that to say, if you try to break your contract, this video goes viral. I put this out. And these musicians had zero lawyers, zero sense. And because they're narcissistic, like everyone in the entertainment industry, they would do it. They'd say, okay, great, you're making me money, but 50 Cent knew about this from the beginning. He wrote some very interesting verses for some of Diddy's musician where it talked about, the cops will never get me. I'm doing things in secret. if you go back into his catalog, it's almost like 50 Cent himself was setting up Diddy. This is allegedly, but again, this is an open secret. These white parties, very satanic, very detrimental to the musicians' careers. If Diddy invites you to a party, everyone knows you don't go unless you're willing to sell your soul. So Diddy basically was this very preying on people, evil character before it was known. Now everyone's going to find out. And I believe he's going to deserve everything he gets. And I hope he gets locked away. But again, this is the tip of the iceberg. Just like Jeffrey Epstein, he was the sacrificial lamb. Diddy is a sacrificial lamb. He's the one we know about. There's many other record execs we don't know about. Potentially Clive Davis, Quincy Jones. Where did Diddy learn it?
Well, as Vinoo no doubt is going to caution everybody here, innocent till proven guilty. These are allegations, and we wouldn't want to presume guilt. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Bruce Rivers, Vinoo Varghese, Joy Villa, and Kimberly Melman Orozco. Thank you.